No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, the only thing that truly has your attention is what you're thinking about. This isn't the only way to define attention, but for understanding the relationship between our attention and how we live our lives, this is the perfect way to think about it. I was diagnosed with ADHD before I could spell my last name. In my defense, my last name is incredibly Polish, so I never really had a chance. Anyway, having a diagnosed attention deficit in a lot of ways makes me the least qualified person in this entire room to be talking about attention. But my relationship with attention has been an epic back and forth battle that's taught me a lot I think we can all learn from. So while you're stuck here, I'm going to tell you about it anyway. Every second, there are hundreds of things fighting for your attention. Some as innocently as a dog looking up at you wagging its tail, but others as mischievously as those ads on Google that know what you're thinking, well before you know what you're thinking. You all know the ones I'm talking about. Just to be clear, right now, I am one of those things fighting for your attention, and hopefully at least a little bit successfully. Most of the things that are fighting for your attention are pesky things that I like to call distractions. Just so we can be on the same page moving forward, we're going to define a distraction as something that occupies your attention without getting you any closer to accomplishing something you find meaningful. In daily life, the most common and obvious way we control our attention is by the things we choose to do. Very often, our actions dictate our thoughts. And on the flip side, our thoughts very often dictate our actions. This can be a really good thing, because when we're doing things that we find meaningful, maybe spending time with family, playing games with friends, or reading about a topic we're passionate about, this is the mechanism that keeps us present or in the moment. This isn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. This relationship doesn't always hold true, and even when it does, it's not without its flaws. Have any of you ever been in a class, conversation, meeting, or something like that, and have caught yourself thinking about something completely off topic, maybe having no idea what anyone had said for the last couple minutes? I know I sure have, way more often than I'd like to admit. Hopefully that hasn't happened to any of you since I've been up here. Anyway, that's the breakdown of this action-thought dynamic or relationship I'm talking about. But even when this doesn't break down, this relationship can be a double-edged sword. When we're doing things that we don't find meaningful, this relationship reinforces that action, keeping our actions on a non-meaningful track, at least temporarily. Like I said earlier, every second there are hundreds of things fighting for our attention, fighting to break in and steal the most valuable thing we have, our thoughts. In my experience, there's a very simple and common pathway that most distractions use to win our attention. To set the scene, let's all pretend we're doing something incredibly important to us. Let's pretend we're writing a letter to a grandparent or a loved one. While we're writing this letter, the letter we want to be writing is competing for our attention with an entire world worth of stimuli, competing with everything we see, hear, touch, smell, feel, and so much more. Fortunately, most of these stimuli are harmless and not important enough for us to even notice, not posing a threat to our letter. But there are some distracting stimuli that are exciting, unexpected, or curiosity-provoking enough to catch our attention. When we notice whatever it is the stimulus happens to be, let's pretend it's a text message. The vibration in our pocket catches our attention, momentarily stealing it away from the letter we want to be writing. We're curious creatures at heart, so we check our phones because we need to see what that vibration represents. We check our phone and we see it's a notification offering us a free scoop of ice cream because yesterday was our birthday. Anyway, in this moment, we need to make a decision, and we base it on this subconscious mental calculus that either boots the stimulus out of thought, out of mind, or lets it hang out just a little bit longer. As it often goes in real-world, integral, derivative, Taylor series calculus, way too often we end up at the wrong answer. It's funny. Anyway, Letting ourselves think about ice cream creates a dissonance between our actions and our thoughts. We're doing something meaningful and important while thinking about something that's not. The only way to resolve this dissonance is to either modify our actions to be aligned with our distracting thought, or to refocus our thinking back to the meaningful action we were previously doing. In the ice cream example, this would look like either going to get ice cream or going back to thinking about the letter we were writing. Anyway, this is the moment where we get to choose what wins our attention. This is the point of no return. This is the point where a distracting thought has the power to turn into a distracting action. When a distracting thought turns into a distracting action, we lose the fight for our attention. Way too often, the fight for our attention has a leg up on us, and it will usually win. So what's the secret to winning the fight for our attention? The secret is to front-load the work. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and a little bit of focus, and a lot of intentionality, but the investment is absolutely worth it. The first thing we need to do is to define and think about what's meaningful to us. Before we know what's meaningful, every single thing is a distraction. To give you some examples from my life, the most meaningful things for me are my relationships with my friends and family, playing outside, being active, exploring nature, trying new things, all while learning as much as I can along the way. What we deem meaningful can vary so much from person to person, and it usually does. I think this is one of the most beautiful things about humanity. Because of this, the world we live in is a diverse mosaic of what passion has driven us to accomplish. Once we've identified our distraction, once we've identified what's meaningful to us, we need to then define and figure out what's standing between us and what we find meaningful. We need to identify our distraction. I've made a habit out of asking myself 3 questions about whatever it is I'm doing. First, is this getting me closer to being the person I want to be? Second, is this making the lives of others better? And third, is this getting me closer to accomplishing something I find meaningful? If all 3 answers are no, then whatever it is I'm doing is a distraction. Once we've identified our distraction, it's time to distraction-proof our environment. Think about that distraction you just identified, and now figure out what stimulus initially let it in the door. Now remove that stimulus from your environment. It's as easy as that. Let me be completely clear, though. I'm not saying you should remove all stimuli from your environment. Even if you could do that, it would make life completely miserable. Distraction proofing is incredibly specific. Every distraction in every environment is different, so every solution needs to be too. Thinking back to the ice cream example, distraction proofing could look like leaving your phone on airplane mode or in your backpack so that you never see the text message telling you it's time to go get ice cream. Or better yet, leaving your phone in your car, or even at home or in your apartment. The goal in this example is to put as much space between us and our phone as possible. By making access to our phone cost as much effort as possible, we're tipping the cost-benefit calculus heavily in our favor. Who here is an excellent decision maker? Anyone? Okay, no one. Well, as a slightly less than excellent decision maker myself, I can confidently tell you that the only sure way to prevent a distraction, to prevent yourself from making a poor decision, rather, is to prevent yourself from getting to the decision-making point in the first place. If we never see the text message, we never need to choose between getting ice cream and writing our letter. Now, that example was not at all trying to say technology is ruining the world. That's not at all what I'm trying to get at with the phone stuff. If I stole that message from the baby boomers, then we'd all need to go back to hearing them complain about participation trophies and how hard it was to walk everywhere uphill both ways. And no one needs to hear that. To give you another example from my life, I have 2 younger brothers, and they're the most important things to me in the entire world. They're my 2 best friends, and they're more important to me than everything else in my life put together. My brothers and I love to play games together. Board games, card games, cribbage, things like that. Usually in our living room, with some form of sports on TV in the background. I hate admitting this, but with sports on, I usually struggle to stay in the moment and to get the most out of spending my time with them. This is especially important to me now that we don't all live in the same place anymore, and time together is very hard to come by. Watching sports is a distraction that can usually steal my attention away from spending time with my brothers or from getting the most out of whatever meaningful thing I'm doing. To attack this distraction, what I try to do is to do things with my brother outside or in a different room where sports and meaningless television can't distract me. When I can successfully do this, it makes it so much easier to give developing my connection with them my full attention. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Because of how specific each distraction is, distraction proofing takes an insane amount of creativity. I try to problem solve within the framework of first, seeing if there's any way to remove the distracting stimuli from my current environment. And if that's not a possibility, I try to find a new environment that I can remove my distracting stimuli from. By distraction proofing our environments, we're distraction proofing our lives. The thing I cannot emphasize enough is that none of this matters unless we know what's meaningful to us. When we can prevent a distracting thought from turning into a distracting action, we win the fight for our attention. Your attention is the most valuable thing you own, and it's all too easy to accidentally give too much of it away. With the right amount of attention, belief, and determination, we've accomplished incredible things. We've cured diseases, engineered flight, mapped the human genome, and put a man on the moon. Great things can happen when we win the fight for our attention. But astonishing things can happen when we know what we're fighting for. Thank you very much. Happy thoughts.